is a writer in Dallas, Texas. He's a graduate of Beloit College in Wisconsin and the executive director of Americans for a Free Republic. He's the author of Breaking the Demopublican Monopoly. Yeah, good luck. He joins us today to talk about an article he wrote for the American Conservative magazine titled The Case for Recession. Nelson Hultberg, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Hi, Michael. Thanks very much for having me on.
In your article, you're making the case that we actually need a recession?
We are now in a position where we have created so much debt in the country that we have to go through a recession in order to purge it. This is something that the American people obviously don't want to face up to, and certainly our government leaders in Washington don't want to face up to this, and I would say that the people on Wall Street don't want to face up to it, and the Federal Reserve, everybody is just sort of avoiding it, and it's there, and we have to face it because a recession is a healthy form of purging of debt that builds up and malinvestment that builds up in an economy. And for years we went through recessions to get this healthy regrowth again reestablished in the economy. And of late, in the last 10 to 15 years, our leaders in Washington and the heads of the Federal Reserve have been trying to avoid this because they fear that going into a recession will suck us into a very deep depression because the buildup of debt has been so heavy in the past. So they've been avoiding the going through the recession, and this is too bad because eventually we will have to go through it, and all they can do is buy some time and stall. Eventually we have to face the music and just go through it. It will be a lot of pain, and we should just get on with it. But so far we don't have the leaders in Washington that can bring about this kind of a policy, and Ben Bernanke's not going to do it. So it doesn't look too favorable. But I do see a recession coming because ultimately the laws of economics prevail, and they will force us to do what has to be done, which is purge the massive debt that Keynesian economics has created for us. And this comes from the central flaw of Keynesian economics.
But the Fed's response has been we can always print more money.
Yes, that is exactly their response, and that comes from Keynes' basic central flaw that he gave us way back in the 30s. See, Keynes was supposed to have cured us of the Depression in the 30s by having the federal government take over the monetary system and pump large doses of credit into the economy through the Federal Reserve whenever the economy showed signs of slowing down. And it was to do this by lowering interest rates to create growth, and then raising interest rates to slow down growth if the economy showed signs of overheating and to price inflation. This manipulation of interest rates works for a while. Printing of money works for a while. The Fed pumps new credit into the system. Businesses flourish. Consumers have purchasing power. Economic growth takes place, and everybody's happy. But the problem in all of this is that the Fed is creating debt with the printing of all this money and the pyramiding of credit upon the printed money. And they're creating debt in order to bring about economic growth, because that's what credit is. It's debt. So if we expand credit throughout the economy, we're expanding debt among the people, and there is always a saturation point for debt. People and businesses can only take on so much debt, and then they have to stop borrowing. It's just common sense. And this is when the Keynesian boom period comes to an end, and you have to go through a recession, which is what we're facing right now. When the Fed, in the next few months to a year, when the Fed offers credit to businesses and consumers, there will be less and less takers, so the credit expansion will slow down, and thus the boom period of economic growth is going to slow down, and then we have to go through the recession. Then the massive buildup of debt has to be liquidated. In other words, it has to be paid off before the businesses and consumers can start borrowing again, and thus expanding the economy again. So this is what we mean when we say that a recession is a healthy purging. It's a way to restore economic health again. But there's a giant problem this time around. The debt levels that we've reached are so massive that it's going to require a very long and deep recession to cleanse the system, maybe even a full-blown depression. So this is the basic flaw of Keynesian economics. It's the creation of credit and debt by government money managers in order to induce economic growth, and thus it gives to government, this is where the real danger comes in, it gives to government the power to create unlimited amounts of credit at will. Now, any study of history and human nature tells us quite clearly that this kind of power is going to be abused by the bureaucrats in charge, and that's exactly what is taking place today. So this is the major flaw and the terrible danger of Keynesian economics. It just simply wants to print up more money to solve our problems, and that doesn't solve anybody's problems at all.
Volcker was able to pull us out of recession in the 70s. You think Bernanke can do it?
Well, he could do it, but I believe it would require a full-blown depression to do it, and that's what I think Bernanke feels too. I think they fear that in the Fed, that in order to really purge the system and restore health like Volcker did in 1980, that would require a long, drawn-out, a very, very deep and vicious recession, which they don't have the will to do anymore. And they're afraid of it because they're afraid that it will suck them into a massive depression, and we'll end up like the Japanese disease, only worse because we don't have the savings buildup that the Japanese had. So they fear very, very greatly to go through the natural, healthy purging of a depression. Volcker did it by raising rates to 18% in 1980 and choked off the inflation. But if we did it, I think it would create a very, very big depression, and I think that's what Bernanke fears. So I don't look for them to do that. What they're doing right now is just stalling. They're grasping at straws. They're hoping they can dump the problem into the next administration, buying for time, and in the process, they're barely exacerbating the problem because eventually you're going to have to face it. You're going to have to purge the debt because things will just get worse and worse. And so what I basically see is just sort of a long bout of stagflation here because no one in Washington has the guts to really put us through the purging process to restore genuine health. I see a long bout of ever-increasing inflation and deflation at the same time. We're going to have what we had in the 70s, only highly exacerbated. It'll be worse. You'll have higher inflation, and you'll have a deeper recession. I believe things will get quite bad over the next 10 years. 15 years maybe. No one can really predict when it will come, when the crisis will reach bad proportions. It could be 2 years down the road, it could be 15 years down the road, but sometime in the next 2 to 15 years, I believe, we're going to get into a really bad economic crisis, that we're going to have to face the music, which means we're going to have to change the system in some dramatic way, and either restore gold or put in maybe Milton Friedman's 4% auto expansion plan for the money supply that would put some check and containment on the Federal Reserve's creation of money and their ability to arbitrarily create the money, because that's really the problem, is that the Fed now has the right to create money arbitrarily and create credit at will. And you can't give government bureaucrats that power and expect them to treat it properly. I've always had a saying that you put a badge on a man's chest, a gun on his hip, and a printing press in his basement, and he's going to abuse that little triad very, very badly. And if you'll study history, you'll see that every government administration in the past history has always abused that process when they have the ability to print money and create a fiat money system and make the people accept it. They will always abuse it, and that's what we're doing right now.
How severe do you think this recession will be? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, yes, there's always light at the end of the tunnel because all we have to do is get through the process. It's just a matter of whether the people are strong enough and the politicians and the bureaucratic bankers are honest enough to explain the facts of reality of the situation to the people so that they will possess and develop the strength of will to get through it. We could get through it by simply letting prices and wages go where they should go and stop inflating the money supply, and we would go through a prolonged period of rough times, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, but the system would right itself if the government would get out of the game of intervention and manipulating interest rates and trying to create money at a faster pace than goods and services are growing. Get out of the money creation game and the interest manipulation game completely. Let prices and wages seek their own level. We would go through a severe recession for probably a year, maybe 2 years. It would be rough, but we would get through it if the government would stay out. But they won't. They won't stay out. They will come back in and try to prop prices up, try to manipulate interest rates again, and sort of paper over the problems. But we could get through it if we had the right mindset, and the politicians and the bureaucratic bankers were honest enough that they could explain to the people what was necessary, what the requisites were, and I believe the American people are strong enough to get through it.
Nelson Hultberg, thanks for being with us on the Savage Nation.